Hey everyone, and welcome to this explainer. I am absolutely thrilled you're tuning in today. We're tackling a foundational concept in programming that honestly trips a lot of people up when they first encounter it, but it really doesn't have to. We're going to demystify object-oriented programming, specifically in C++. So let's just dive right into it. Today, we're going to explicitly bridge the gap between real-world analogies that you already intuitively understand and the actual C++ code you'll eventually be writing on your own. By the time we wrap up, thinking in objects is going to feel entirely like second nature to you.
Here is our concept to code path for today. First, objects in the real world. Second, the basics of OOP. Third, classes versus objects. Fourth, inside the class. And finally, number 5, building with constructors. Let's get right to it. Starting off with Section 1, objects in the real world. To truly understand how we build software, we actually need to step completely outside of the computer for a minute and just look at our physical reality. Everything surrounding us is an object. Take a second and really let that bold claim sink in. It comes straight from our source material, and it sets the absolute perfect foundational mindset for our entire explainer today. Seriously, just look around the room you're sitting in right now. The desk, the chair, the coffee mug you're drinking from, literally every single thing is an object.
Now, real-world objects basically fall into two categories, right? We have animate objects, like a human or a dog, and inanimate objects, like a car, a football, or a door. But here's the thing. Regardless of whether they are animate or inanimate, they all share a fundamental structure. They all possess specific attributes. Think of a human's name, their age, or their weight. And they all have behaviors. A human eats and sleeps. A door swings open and clicks shut. Attributes and behaviors. Definitely hold on to those two words, because they are the absolute core of everything we're doing today.
But obviously, these objects don't just exist in total isolation. They interact. They communicate by sending messages. Think of a sergeant commanding a soldier to stand at attention. That is a very clear form of communication. But how does this interaction physically happen for inanimate things? Well, it happens through object interfaces. If you want to communicate with a closed door, you use its interface, the door handle. If you want to communicate your intentions to a speeding car, you use the steering wheel.
Which brings up a really fascinating question. Why can you effectively drive a car without understanding exactly how fuel injection works in its engine? The answer is information hiding. Real-world objects hide their internal details from the surrounding environment for two massive reasons. First, for protection from tampering, just like human skin protects the internal organs of the body from sunlight and radiation. And second, for sheer ease of use. You can grip the steering wheel interface without paying any attention to the messy, complicated, highly explosive internal implementation of that engine block.
So, now that we've firmly grasped how objects work in our physical environment, let's transition smoothly into Section 2 and see how we model these exact same concepts in software.
How do we translate our real-world objects into C++? Through encapsulation. Object-oriented programming encapsulates data, which are those attributes we talked about a minute ago, and methods, which are our behaviors, into a single software package called an object. We're permanently binding an object's characteristics with its actions. And think about why that's so incredibly powerful. Instead of having data just floating around aimlessly in your program, everything related to a specific object is neatly tied together in one cohesive bundle. It directly mirrors reality.
And just like our car engine, software objects need strict boundaries. In OOP, encapsulation acts as information hiding. The software version of information hiding does exactly what our real-world analogies do. It keeps the messy internal implementation of an object completely out of sight from the rest of the program. It protects sensitive data, prevents accidental tampering by other parts of the code, and ultimately, it just makes the object way easier and safer to use.
All right, let's move right along to Section 3, classes versus objects. We're introducing what is arguably the single most crucial distinction you need to understand in all of object-oriented programming.
To model these real-world objects in code, we use both classes and objects. And here is exactly how they differ. Think of a class as a house blueprint. The blueprint carefully defines what the house is going to look like. It defines the overall data type. But you can't live in a blueprint. And crucially, it takes up 0 memory space in your computer. No memory is allocated for a class. An object, on the other hand, is the physical house. It is an instantiation. It's an actual concrete example of that class blueprint brought to life. And that actually does take up allocated memory on your machine.
Okay, let's finally look at some actual C++ syntax. To write this blueprint, you use the keyword class, followed by your chosen class identifier, let's say car or human. Then, inside the curly braces, you write out your entire class members list. And please, underline this next part in your mind right now. See that crucial semicolon at the very end of the closing brace? Forgetting that semicolon is basically a rite of passage for every beginner programmer. You will absolutely forget it at least once, spend hours debugging, and then finally realize what happened. But hey, now you know to watch out for it.
So, we have our blueprint outlined, but what actually goes inside those curly braces? Let's transition to Section 4 and take a look inside the class.
Inside a class, members generally fall into one of two buckets, a variable or a function. Let's explicitly translate this terminology so it clicks. When you declare a variable inside a class, you are just writing code for the attributes or data we talked about earlier, like age or weight or top speed. When you list a function inside a class, you're writing the code for its behaviors or methods, like sleep, eat, or accelerate. To put it super simply, variables are what the object knows, functions are what the object does.
Now, C++ enforces that information hiding we talked about through three specific access modifiers for our members: private, public, and protected. If you make a member private, it absolutely cannot be accessed from outside the class. It is completely hidden. If it's public, it's freely accessible outside. And here is the absolute genius of C++. By default, all members of a class are inherently private. The language automatically enforces information hiding right out of the gate, forcing you to consciously decide what actually gets exposed.
So the natural question is, if our data variables are privately hidden away by default, how do we safely interact with them? Well, we write specific public functions to act as our interfaces. Take a moment to digest this. We use accessor functions, which merely read the data values without changing them, and mutator functions, which are explicitly designed to safely modify those values. By forcing the rest of your program to go through these carefully controlled functions, the object maintains total control over its own internal state.
Once you have a physical object actually instantiated from your blueprint, how do you trigger those public functions in your code? It's remarkably simple. You just write the name of your object, followed by a dot, and then the member name. The dot is literally called the member access operator. It's exactly like reaching out your hand and grabbing the object's interface, like turning that door handle or grabbing that steering wheel we talked about.
We have reached the final step of our journey today. Let's dive into Section 5, where we automate the process of bringing our blueprints to life properly. Building with constructors. Consider this immensely practical problem. When you build a physical house, you definitely don't want to move in before the plumbing is fully hooked up and tested, right? Well, similarly in C++, when you create a class object, how do you guarantee all its variables are properly initialized the very moment it enters memory?
We solve this critical issue by using constructors. A constructor is a very special function designed specifically to guarantee that member variables are properly initialized from the exact moment of creation. And it has some highly unique traits. First, the name of a constructor must perfectly match the exact name of the class itself. Furthermore, unlike a normal function, a constructor has absolutely no return type. Not an integer, not a string, not even void. It exists solely to build.
Now, a class can actually have multiple different constructors, each taking a different list of parameters so you can build objects in various ways. But the most fundamental one is the default constructor. This is a constructor that expects absolutely no parameters from you, or one where all the parameters have predetermined default values set. For example, it might automatically set a brand new car object's mileage variable to 0. It acts as your solid, reliable baseline when you just need a standard object created without any custom fuss.
Let's walk through the automated magic of how this actually executes in your code. Step 1, your class object is declared and enters scope. Step 2, C++ looks at the arguments you provided, if any, and searches for a constructor that perfectly matches those types. Step 3, once it finds the exact match, that specific constructor executes entirely automatically. But be super careful here. If C++ gets confused and there is any ambiguity at all about which constructor it should pick, it won't just guess. It will immediately throw a compile time error. You must be impeccably clear with your instructions.
And there you have it. We've made it from abstract physical reality all the way down to C++ syntax. You now understand how to define a blueprint, hide its data safely, interact with it through public interfaces, and automatically initialize it with constructors. So, I'm going to leave you with this provocative thought to ponder. Look around your room one more time. Now that you have the power to write the blueprint, What real-world object are you going to bring to life in your code next? Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and happy coding!